I opened a notebook and wrote at the top of the page, "Why has all the joy drained out of my life?" And then below it, I couldn't think of anything else to write, but it felt like an apt question, and it felt true that the joy had somewhere in the past several years completely drained out of my life, and I couldn't figure out what had caused it. I thought for a few minutes, oh, maybe it's loneliness. Maybe I'm just lonely. But then as I thought about it, I was like, no, I don't think I'm any more lonely really than I've been before. I'm not more alone than I've been before. Then I thought maybe it's work. And that felt more accurate and true and more of an explanation of the situation I found myself in. And so I thought, well, maybe I just need to work towards a change. Maybe I just need a change of pace, a change of vocation. Really, that's what I need. And then I did finally leave the situation I was in. I left the whole field I was in. And still, as I went about my day-to-day life, it did feel like all the joy was still drained. The joy was not coming back when I had thought it might come back. And I really couldn't figure out what it was, apart from the fact that I felt busier than ever before. I felt like I had more to do to justify myself in the world, to justify my existence as a person than I ever had to do before. And I was confused by it. And then one day, I was walking home from a little work session in a cafe, and I was thinking about all that I'd done already in that day and how many more things I still felt like I needed to do in the evening. And then it all dawned on me. I am constantly in a hurry, and this culture of hurry that surrounds me, this culture of rush, 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 do all the time, it's ruined years of my life. And I really do have like a comparison point here too, because it hasn't always felt this way. Life has not always felt this way. There was a time, certainly when I was a student, I think, when I truly didn't feel like I was in a hurry all the time. In fact, I carefully constructed my life through all the years that I was a student, through high school, bachelor's, master's, PhD, so that I never truly had to be like in a huge hurry all the time. Now, first, let me define hurry a little bit here, because it's not just a state of being like, oh, I'm like going. I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm all over the place all the time. It's not just that. Like, that can be fine sometimes. Like, that can even be exciting sometimes. But it's like the state of hurry I'm talking about is more of like an endemic state of hurry. It's more just it more infiltrates your life. It's more a state of feeling that you always have so much more to do than you possibly could have time to do. That's the type of hurry I'm talking about. And it's a feeling that no matter how much you accomplish, no matter how many big projects you push out of the way, you are still going to have so much more come in to fill its space. There is no escape from it. It never stops. But before, when I was a student, I never felt that way. I never felt like there was more to do than I needed to do. I knew what was required of me. I knew how to do it. And I knew if I dedicate a bit of time each day to doing it, I will get it done. And so I never in my entire many years of being a student pulled an all-nighter. I was rarely rushing to finish an essay by the deadline. And it's not because I was incredibly conscientious or just really enjoyed doing my work every day. No, it was because I knew that the stress that it would cause me to have to pull an all-nighter or to be cramming for a test that I hadn't studied for sufficiently, that would cause me so much more stress than the minor pain of getting out my textbooks every day and doing a little bit of work from them. It was a trade-off, and I knew that, and I constructed my life to account for that trade-off. But then I moved to New York after finishing all of my studies, and I got a job in the nonprofit sector. And now in particular, I got a job with a founder-led nonprofit. Now this is kind of important here to understand the sense of hurry and rush that is implicit in this, because founder-led nonprofits oftentimes will be newer, smaller organizations. That's important. And they will often have lofty goals for changing the world, for making society better. What's also implied in this, I think, is like the like kind of inferiority complex, like that's just like kind of in these small nonprofits like way of working, way of being. Like they're not corporate entities, and yet they kind of feel self-conscious about not being corporate entities. They feel like they need to like work according to corporate standards without having the budget or the staff. But, you know, there are a lot of reasons for it, most of them to do with funding, but you know, whatever the reasons are, it doesn't improve the situation for the workers who then have to implement the grand plans to make these small nonprofits operate according to like the grand corporate vision of society. And so I started working in that kind of situation. I've worked now within several like founder-led organizations, like several, and they all kind of have this same mentality. Now, some are way nicer than others, obviously. Some are way, way more respectful of people's time than others, but there is this inferiority complex. And like when you are tasked with kind of like propping up the organization's vision with like grand language and stuff, it becomes like super, super tiring. And it also brings this real sense of perfectionism, having to use exactly the right jargony language to exactly the right effect. And it's working in contexts where it can feel like the goalposts for what is good, for what is quality, for what is the organizational message overall. It's always shifting. You're always having to adapt and change to like use the word of the moment, the idea of the moment. It's never good enough. It always is striving to be better, more perfect. And like all of this is what it is. You know, and it's like, that's not really the whole point of what I'm trying to say here today. It's like, what happened though is like through working in these environments, I think I inadvertently internalized some of this perfectionist, like inferiority complex mentality into like my own life. And so I started to become, first of all, obsessed with the idea that, well, I think I will need to get out of this situation eventually. But to do that, I'm going to have my own grand plan. I have to become my own visionary leader. So I have to perfect myself. I was striving constantly. Striving, always rushing, and not rushing in a physical sense, almost like rushing in a mental sense, hurrying always to produce the best idea, the best language, the best whatever. And where did it lead me? It just led me to feel horrible all the time. Because when you have this mentality of always being strapped for time, never enough time to express all of the ideas that you need to express in an adequate way, when you feel like you can't do that, when you feel like there's never enough time to do justice to the ideas, to the visionary ideas that you have or that your employer has, and you live within that context for long enough, yeah, all the joy does drain right out. And you're left feeling like an empty husk of a person. And that's exactly what happened to me. And it was that way for years. And it's like, it's only now that I'm starting to realize that I need to break the cycle. I need to stop applying these same rules to myself that I learned in this certain environment. I need to get back to having a clearer idea, I guess, of like what is adequate and what will be enough. And how can I put safeguards up in my day and in my time to prevent myself from falling back into these old perfectionistic, never enough time kind of ways? When you're living in this way, there's no celebration. Once you finish something, you just always have to get stuck on to the next thing. You never have time to say, hey, look, like look at this job well done. Look what I accomplished here. You don't have time for that. You have to then say, okay, well, we've accomplished that now. We got to do the next. Like, we got to keep building, keep growing, keep developing the concept. And where does it lead? And the fact is, I think it never does end. There never will be a point where it is good enough. There will always be something more to do, some grander project to take on. Like, as soon as one thing gets done, indeed another thing will rush in to take its place. And it is the most exhausting way to live that I could possibly have imagined. And I can't believe I got stuck in that for so long, and I can't believe how much it infiltrated my own thoughts, because like that's what's so terrifying, is that it is still there. This idea that nothing will ever be enough and that I just have to start on the next project as soon as I finish any single little thing, it's so there. It is so there in my day-to-day life. I'm sure this is kind of particular maybe to like a certain culture, like a certain aspect of culture. This is probably not everywhere. I know it's not everywhere because I escaped it for the first 29 years of my life. And it was like I had to learn this different culture, this culture of perfectionism, I suppose, this like barrage of activity and vision and mission and strategy and the constant need to fulfill all of the goals of the strategy. And it's like, why? And yeah, I mean, I just, I didn't grow up in this, and I don't actually think, having lived in it now, that it has value. So I reject it, and I hope others will reject it alongside me, because it does feel pretty endemic to our culture, to whatever cultural group I am in. Professional managerial class, let's hope not. Ugh. It's really hard. It's really hard to overcome that conditioning. Anyway, let's deprogram. Deprogram. Just deprogram. Just deprogram.